Is there more to Charlie Kirk's death? Was it an assassination? Seems so. By one people? By more? And by whom? Tyler Robinson? Is he another Lee Harvey Oswald? Meaning what? Well, just part of something, not everything. Is it as simple, though, as the text that we've seen? This was a confused, deranged, sick, whatever young man who acted on the increasing impulse in our society of expressing extreme politics through violence. Is that the explanation? Is that why this happened? Because Tyler Robinson didn't like what Charlie Kirk said. Maybe what he thought Charlie Kirk was about. And he thought he was defending something or protecting against something or fighting for something or fighting against something. And that's what this was.
It's exactly what I was thinking. I've said from day one, and again, to minimize the hate mail, I'm not saying prosecutors should give him, I just want to minimize it. I'll get it. They called my office the other day 4 times. I'm not saying that prosecutors should give him life and waive the death penalty. I'm saying both parties should give serious consideration to exploring that resolution, okay? But going back to this judge, your guest makes a very enlightening point. Because this judge has that quality in him, and I would say it's not Ito-esque, you can call it that. I'll call it just wanting to be overly fair. He's not going to be one of those judges that I encounter who says, Mr. Eiglarsh, no more continuances. This is going to trial no matter what. He seems like someone who will let the defense do exactly what most defense lawyers do. Cases for the defense get better with age like wine. And every day that the prosecution's saying, we want death, we still want death, we still want death, we're not waiving death penalty, that's a day where you want to keep moving on, moving past until you can unlock it and get a prosecutor who will say otherwise. It took me 5 years on a recent death case to finally get the prosecutor to give my client life, and the facts were 10 times worse than this case.
So, you know what he also did? Not on purpose to be like Mr. Eiglarsh and defend the dignity of his honor, but he has given huge opportunity to conspiracy theorists, because now what they are saying is, this was so simple, why was even the preliminary hearing so protracted? Because there's more here, and the judge knows it, that it's not as simple as they want you to believe. And look, you know, that is an absolute truth, because I hear it in true crime circles and monitoring and preparing for how to deal with this a lot. So let's look at what they put out there and whether it passes the smell test for Jules and the legal threshold for Mark. So, Jules, the first one, and I think the most compelling, if there were a scintilla of truth to it, is if this was as simple as what it was, then why did the Charlie Kirk guys and the TPUSA guys do all these weird things to the crime scene immediately after? Do we know that anybody did anything to this crime scene that should be seen as suspicious or unusual?
So I'm going to have to plead a little bit of ignorance there as to what was allegedly done at the crime scene. So assuming somebody messed around, that's grist for the defense mill, right? Because anything that raises a question is, quote, reasonable doubt type argument. The real question is there anything that tampered with the gun, the towel, the fired cartridge case? As long as that is, my word, pristine, right? That the collection there was fine. Especially with this, what's found in this guy's house, including that instrument, I forget the name of it, that allows you to like inscribe things on cartridge cases. The real concern here is the link to that gun and the link of the gun to the body.
What about, because you're talking about the cartridge, what about the idea that what they found in Charlie Kirk didn't match the rifling or the marks inside the weapon that they found?
So I didn't get that it did not match. I get, okay, when bullet gets fired and goes into the body, it can fragment.
Mm-hmm.
If you're up close with a 22, it might not. The higher power and the greater distance, and depending on what bones it hits. So it's not that it did not match. It's that there's not enough left to say we can match it. But as best I could tell, there was nothing that would say it's inconsistent. In other words, if one is metal and one is copper, or something like that, there's no discord. There's just a shattered bullet.
Okay, I'm with you on that one, and people can say whatever they want, but they are wrong, because I've seen it dozens and dozens and dozens of times where exactly what you just said is the case, which is why Jules analogizes it that way, is because this is fairly common, okay? And it certainly didn't mean anything to any of the investigators or the judge. However, here is an interesting one that is true enough. Okay. I don't know why, though. And that's why I'll bring you in on this, Mark, even though it's an evidence question. After the event, Utah Valley University did make changes at the area where this happened. It had been all grass, and it was dug up and covered with brick pavers. And this did happen. Reuters and other local, types documented the work being done. So why was it done? There is no answer from Utah Valley about why it was done, but it was done, and it is being used. Well, you tampered with the scene. You were trying to cover it up because it was actually something else.
Ay, Gavalt. You know what? Listen. Okay. All right. There are many non-nefarious reasons why they changed the scene. There would be no reasons I can think of that they would benefit from changing grass to brick, because somehow that will then mean that it shows that this defendant did it to the exclusion of others. Like, it makes no sense. It's almost silly that but we have to discuss it because some knuckleheads are raising it.
Phishing emails, not the kind I like with an F, a PH. They happen all the time. They're getting better and better. You got all different kinds of software and troll farms and AI and automated things coming at you. It's harder and harder to see it coming, and it's harder and harder to escape it once you make one wrong move. You click the link, enter your information, and suddenly you're done. They got you in a way that is very hard to undo, unless you have OmniWatch. OmniWatch is a great countermeasure. Scans Gmail and Outlook for phishing threats before you click. Offers 360-degree identity protection. Gives you access to US-based scam experts. If something does happen, restoration specialists are available 24/7, 365 to help you recover. You're backed up by up to $100,000 in scam and ransomware coverage and up to $4 million in identity theft insurance. That's what OmniWatch is about. Don't wait until you're a victim. Click the link in the description. It's safe. Or any of the pinned comments that you see to run a free dark web scan and see if your information has already been exposed. Click the link in my description and use the code CUOMO, and you'll get 50% off your first month with OmniWatch. Look, the threat is real. OmniWatch is the way to deal with that threat.
But
well,
it makes no
usually you
sense.
preserve a crime scene as for a while. Here, it was just a few days.
So let me stay with that, right? There are two entities or interests here. The prosecution and sort of public interest is forget when they changed it. Until they changed it, did they have enough video footage and forensic examinations to say, okay, I mean, I'm here in my law school office with one of my students who I brought along because she did all the research for today. She's the one who gets the real credit for anything I say, right? My office isn't real big. And so if my student decides I'm tired of this professor and blows me away, right? They're going to come in and they're going to take the photos and do the measurements, and then they're probably going to repaint the office. So the real issue is what was preserved prior to this makeover.
Yeah, I have every reason to believe that crime scene went out and took photographs and preserved the area.
Absolutely.
And then the fact that they change it or they move on could be for many reasons. And it's not anything nefarious.
Correlation is not causation.
Right.
But what about the other Lee Harvey analogy here, which is that weapon, that distance, that angle, the way Charlie was hit, it doesn't add up. Is there anything to that analysis? I'll start with you, Jules.
So I haven't seen, bullet angles are, bullet angles vary.
You can bring the student in, Jules, if you want. This is a very open format. Now that I know that you're nothing but hair and teeth, now that I know that you're nothing but a puppet for somebody else's agenda.
Such a puppet. Now, so here's the deal with bullet angles. Okay, bullet angles depend on a couple of things: the relative height of the shooter to the victim, and in the second before the shot hits, did the victim move? Okay, if I'm standing up and I get shot here, it should come out at the same place in my back. As soon as I lean forward, it's going to come out lower on my back. So there's no magic that says from what I've read, that from where the shooter was alleged to have been to where Mr. Kirk is, that angle is at all impossible.
Yeah, good points. And let me add to whoever's coming up with this stupid theory. So let me guess. So what they're saying is there's another shooter. It wasn't Tyler Robinson, another shooter, even though the DNA ties Tyler Robinson to that particular gun in that particular location. Another shooter, not Tyler Robinson. Oh, yeah. Did that shooter write, I had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk and I took it? Oh, no, that was Tyler Robinson. The DNA matches him, gun area, boom, boom. Yeah, I'm not buying it.
But what if he's not alone? And boy, this is, of course, it's so obvious. That's what you do when you're covering something up, is that I lead you like the simpleton that you're being here, Eiglarsh, and you just jump on that one text which I gave you to distract from this much bigger conspiracy.
You're right. Where was Carrot Top during the shooting? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Gloria Estefan, where was she? Anything is possible.
So I think we're asking also the different question now, which is, what's the evidence against Tyler versus, which is an independent issue, was Tyler flying solo, right? None of that has to do, or very little has to do, with Tyler guilt, non-guilt, culpability, non-culpability. Whether I do it because Mark, you've already heard that I'm a puppet, okay? So if Elizabeth makes me do the shooting, I'm still the shooter.
Mm-hmm. Right. There's no question about that. But again, and look, on one level, this is social media, the streaming, it has hatched in a cottage industry here. And it's one of the reasons that I got into it, is to kind of try to put some guardrails on this, try to put some reasonable in this. Why? Well, I'm not sure why. And here's the question, and it's a little bit of a departure, but it's an important conversation. Really, none of this matters except what happens in the courtroom. And if it wasn't for idiots in the media like me asking for access and cameras in the courtroom, really none of this matters, because it'll all just happen in the courtroom and the people out there can think what they want, and you have your conspiracies, and we're not going to show you any of the proof, and we're not going to do anything until after the trial. And that's how it is. And nobody's talking and nobody's going to explain it. That would be fine, but that's not how it works these days. And it does seem that what happens in the court of public opinion does matter.
You're right. You're right.
Mark.
And it scares me, because when I first read, I remember where I was when I don't know, John Lennon was shot. I remember, where I was when, obviously at the hospital when my first son was born. But I also remember the first time that I read somebody saying that it was okay that Luigi Mangione shot and killed an executive because of how that executive was treating other people. And I thought, there's one fringe nut job out there. I've been floored by how many people share that belief. Similarly, when people are starting to believe these conspiracy theories, these are the ones who are selected to go in and serve on jury duty. And there's no such thing as the mainstream media and everything else is just to be, ignored. No, it's all blended together. So people say, I heard this, I heard that. It all becomes fact to them. And then they're asked a few symbolic questions in court because we rarely get enough jury selection time. And people present to you what they want to present to you, leaving out all the other stuff that they heard. And then, oh my goodness, you got stealth jurors. That does scare me, Chris.
Jules, you've been doing this a minute. I thought that this died with Rush Limbaugh. I was wrong. Then I thought it died when Alex Jones was exposed by his own attorney in a custody hearing when he said, my client plays a character. What he says is not what he means. It is an act. And I was like, all right, now they'll get it. Now they get the Sandy Hook bullshit. Now they get it all. That'll be it. I was wrong. And now we have Candace Owens, who is doing the same kind of thing. And it is working every bit as well as it ever has. Is that because the rate of disrespect for the institutions and for anything approximating power is stronger than people realizing that there are those feeding their phobias?
So now you're going into my extremely non-expert area of what the hell is wrong in this
I already
country.
know somebody's feeding you information. So really, I'm just asking you as a guy who's done this for a long time, what your sense is of the culture around it.
So what my sense of the culture around it is exactly what you said, that there is no common ground for what is a source that we can all reasonably rely on. And obviously there are people who, this is a mixed metaphor, fan those flames because it's good for them financially or politically or whatever. In this case, if we bring it back to this for a second, Chris, it's going to be an interesting problem for both sides. So, right, what was said a moment ago about the limited inquiry, what's called voir dire, the jury selection. I suspect that there's going to be a demand for jury questionnaires, really wide open jury selection here. And the prosecutor is going to want it as much as the defense, because everything you're talking about, Chris, I think inures to the benefit of the defense. On the other hand, right, if I'm trying to defend someone who killed Charlie Kirk in Utah, my client is not the most popular, nor is his cause, right? So the ability to get any fair jury is always tough. The ability to get it here, adding to it that the only people who can sit on the jury are people who favor the death penalty, it's going to be a really hard task to get 12 people who can say, maybe I've heard some stuff, but I can put it away, which is a really hard task cognitively. And I can start from scratch and say, let me look at this objectively. And I won't judge this by anything except what is in the courtroom, not some rumor or not some political screed or something like that. Answer, sorry.
I got no, not at all. I'm happy for it. I like complete thoughts. It's one of the best values of podcasts.
Right.
Mark, here's something that's easy to slap away, but it is very much in play. And it is that, who cares if they're really fair? The guy obviously did it. And if that's overwhelming to them before they even get in there, that's how it is. That's what happens when you admit to something. Like Mangione, when they get you and you wrote a manifesto about why you were doing this, and then they catch you doing it with the manifesto, and then you have the weapon. That's it. I don't care if you come into it with a bias, because it doesn't matter. It's an open and shut case. Why is that? On one level, that's very satisfying for me to say that. That feels righteous. And yet, all the training, all the years make me feel that that is really frightening thing to give into.
Correct.
And it seems like we are giving into it.
No, we cannot. It's a challenge for all
Why?
of us.
Why can't we give into it?
Because
it's
when
obvious?
we lower the burden of proof for Casey Anthony, for OJ, for whoever the hell else you think did it, and I happen to believe that Tyler Robinson did it, when we lower the burden of proof for him, it affects us all. Picture your precious offspring being arrested for something. Now the burden of proof is lowered, right? In certain instances, because we think that they wrote some confession, right? We don't know that. That's the alleged confession. Did the officer write it? Did he write it? That has to be proven, right? So all of it has to be proven. Now, we're not in a court of law. We're in the court of public opinion. So I'm free to have whatever thoughts that I want. We just want the jurors to come in there holding the government or the state, if it's a state case, to the highest burden under the law and presume or believe that he's innocent. And as long as it works, we're cool. But yeah, we cannot give in to those urges where we go, well, screw it. Because there have been people, Duke Lacrosse, those guys were thrown under the bus. Many believed erroneously in what Nancy Grace was spewing. These guys were guilty as hell, and they weren't. They were innocent.
Now,
May I, real quick?
Go ahead, Jules.
Sorry,
go
Chris.
ahead. Please, no.
There are two other things. One is did he do it? That seems a relatively crystal clear thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get into layers of crimes. Was it first-degree murder? Was it aggravated first-degree murder? Where we're talking about, can we figure out his mental state? So it's not just guilty or not guilty.
And to Jules' point, then we go to, okay, well, does he deserve death? That's a whole nother layer, because death is different, the Supreme Court has ruled. Is this the type of case that warrants a death penalty? And let me tell you something. People can knee-jerk and say yes. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. I've seen jurors on slam dunk cases say, you know what, I think life is more appropriate. And you're going, oh my God, so now the prosecution's a failure? No, it's reasonably foreseeable. You got to have all 12 saying he should die. And you know what? I don't know that that's an easy task.
Especially where his widow.
Right.
And I'm not a fan of Mr. Kirk's beliefs, but I'm incredibly admiring of his widow saying, I forgive him.
Well, she has said with respect to the death penalty, and again, she has every right to shifts in her emotions as she processes this, blindsiding of her reality, right? And her future and everything else. I mean, these are young people that we're talking about. Anyway, I don't want it on my ledger, she said. I don't want to have to own the decision of whether or not he dies. Now, what's interesting as a side note is that has been weaponized. Oh, she doesn't want him to die because that was the deal. And although I don't know how anybody was going to make a deal where they're going to go away forever for this when they're a young person, like it really matters. They're basically dead anyway. But it doesn't make sense, but it is out there, and that is what she has said about it. One step sideways to make Eiglarsh's point, and as a pat on my own back. The Duke Lacrosse case, Nifong was the prosecutor. People couldn't believe that he would just be lying to your face about what had happened. And then he gets asked, hey, did you bring the boys in before? And he said, well, some came in. And then I get a call from a parent who says they didn't just go in. They were all told to come in. They were all told not to call their parents, not to call anybody. And when they came in, they were told they had to take their shirts off and turn around because they had been told that the woman had scratched them up and the boys wanted to clear themselves, so they did it. And when that was put to Nifong's office, they refused to comment, and we started to get suspicious. And then the kind of moment that only happens when you're actually doing the job. I'm sitting in a taxi cab in Raleigh, Durham. I'm working for ABC News. And the cab driver hears me having a conversation about the timeline and how long they were there. And then this guy left and this guy went to get a hamburger, and, who rapes a woman and then goes and gets a hamburger? What does that say about what kind of kid this is? And he turns around and he says, that's not when he went home. And I said, excuse me? And he says, that's not when that guy went there. I took him. And I said, wait, what do you mean you took him? He's like, I remember, I remember who this kid is. I've been following what's going on. I took him. And I'm telling you, it was like an hour and a half earlier than that. And I was like, wait, what do you mean it was an hour? And he's like, I'm telling you, I remember, and he was right. He got us I don't even know if they still do it anymore, but they used to have like a book where they wrote down all their fares, called a hack list. And there it was, and what time he picked them up and what time he dropped them off. And it changed the time frame significantly in a way that made Crystal Mangum, who was the main complainant, her story not make sense. And a huge gap in hours that she had to account for. And of course, Nifong was lying. She had manufactured the story, whether it was with or without his assistance is, up for debate. And they had it wrong. And he had it wrong for political reasons. Now, that was the right outcome. But what did that do? Fuel that there's always something else going on. You can't believe the system. You can't believe them. And I hear about it all the time. That case gets thrown in my face all the time. So back to the nuts and bolts, which is where if you really care and you're a critical thinker, that's where you live on these. Not, wow, Candace Owens really hates Erica Kirk. Who cares? On one level, you got to give it to Candace. She's getting those clicks. You guys have made her at least hundreds of thousands of dollars, at least on this. Bravo to you. Because let me tell you, nothing she's saying is going to pan out. And she can explain it any way she wants. But she's on about the same footing as she is that Macron's wife is a man. Okay? That's about how sure her footing is. When you look at what we know and what you would need to know, Jules, the idea that looking at this setup, it had to involve somebody else. He could never have done this on his own. What is your professional assessment about there's anything about what we know to this point that is suggestive that this was a lot for him to pull off?
I'm going to have to beg off on that one a little bit. I will simply say it's amazing. I started trying homicides in 1993. So you're right. I'm been around for a long time. It is amazing and sad what an individual can put together and do. Especially when people have done it before, right? This wasn't the most original, and I'm not trying to minimize the horror. It's not like this was a super creative, super anything. This was a sniper thing. And there are movies about snipers. And now, does that mean he didn't have an echo chamber, some sort of system that was reinforcing his beliefs? That's sadly the case often today.
I'll tell you what, the roommate doesn't help their conspiracy theory. I got to tell you. Now, I will say this: the roommate, Mark, the boyfriend, the roommate, the girlfriend, whatever you want to call them, the testimony or whatever, the statement that they recorded wasn't as compelling as I thought it may be, but it definitely checked all the boxes. There was no mention of anyone else. There was no mention of anything else in terms of why this happened. And the one thing that was in there that I think is very helpful for the defense is he was immediately upset and regretted having done it, says this person. Now, we don't know if they're just trying to help him out because they care about him. We don't know. But when you look at it and the video that they have already and the texts already, what is the chance in your mind that this was part of a larger plot and he was just one piece, as opposed to a guy who walked in because the security was lax with a gun down his pant leg?
Look, I'll start off with anything is possible, right? But I'm following the evidence. I see no evidence other than what supports the state's theory. I agree with you that the roommate is not Martin Luther King-esque. He doesn't speak, as eloquently as that. And if it was just him saying, Tyler admitted to me X, Y, and Z, I'd be like, they're going to be able to rip him a new one fairly easily. But what he's saying is corroborated by what's written down. You'd have to believe that a law enforcement officer somehow put down the words, For example, I wish we could have lived in a world where this did not feel necessary. I lack the words to express how much I love you and how very much you mean to me. Please try and find joy in this life. I love you always. I mean, look, to the theorist's point, you go through great lengths, Tyler Robinson does, to prevent him from being identified. And then knowing that they're going to find all this, what, you just throw it out there? That's probably the best point that they've got. And the truth of the matter is, who knows why he did it? You know, who knows? People do stupid stuff, which is why motive never has to be proven in a homicide case, because people do stupid stuff.
But a jury always wants to hear it.
Sure they do. And if prosecutors got it, then you put it out there as potential theories. Why not? They don't have to.
I think that what is interesting is, to your point, Jules, is the opposite of your point. What we used to call the contrapositive. Which is, people can do really sophisticated, horrible things all on their own when they're not sophisticated genius types. Also, the reverse point is that when something involves multiple people, there's usually a signature of that as well. There are communications, there are meetings, there is coordination, and sometimes you actually get lucky enough that there are visuals, of other people. We don't have any of that here yet. They are very good at investigating digital footprint. And what is the likelihood that if he was talking to people about this, even if he was trying to hide those communications, they're going to find them?
The way people can unravel or get inside of social media today is amazing and scary. And let me add one other thing, and I think I'm right. Mark, please tell me if this is crazy sounding, or you, Chris. Given the politics of today and the FBI jumping in, they would love to have this be a greater conspiracy, right? What would feed into the Kash Patel view of the world more than, and we've got it going right now where the Secretary of State is trying to get a meeting of nations to deal with left-wing terrorism, right? They would love a conspiracy here. It would only further their agenda. So the fact that they haven't come up with a scintilla, at least to my worldview, right, so makes some sense there that if it was there, they had no reason to deep six it.
I can't speak to the politics of it, but I don't think it helps their position legally. You want to keep it as simple as possible. You got one guy, he did all this, he's capable of doing it. We see him on the video, that's him. All the stuff matches. It's simple, open and shut. That's it.
Right.
Anything more than that gives the defense something to play with. Maybe there were other people involved, and the jurors start to erroneously think, well, that matters. If there's other people involved, why is he the only one here? And maybe they did something, and all of a sudden it turns into something more.
I think the most convenient one that I actually haven't seen anywhere yet, and I am not advancing it, I don't believe it, but I guess the reason I haven't seen it is that it doesn't really advance any of the agendas that are at play in terms of playing on people's phobias and paranoia and suspicions and animus. It was the roommate. The roommate engineered this. The roommate is the LGBTQ plus person. This guy is her patsy, his patsy, their patsy. And they put him up to it. And those texts are exactly the way they wanted them to be, because that's how they massaged it. In the world of fiction, that's the most likely alternative universe, is that's the guy who wanted it done. That's the person who hated Charlie Kirk. That's the person who wanted to use this useful idiot to take the fall for their own agenda. But there is absolutely no proof of that, Jules and Mark. But you want to play, that's what they should be playing with, as opposed to it was Erica Kirk.
But it's no play. It's no play because he still took the gun, right? It's not like he was drugged. It's not like he was hypnotized. If someone plays on my emotions and gets my head in that place, the law doesn't absolve me because my lover used their lover wiles, if that's such a right, to get me to my head to a certain place.
But you could prosecute somebody who did that.
You could separately, right? It's a lot harder. You'd have to show that they weren't just playing on the emotions, but really had in mind the intent that Tyler would then go out and kill. Any of that background stuff, if anywhere, again, at the death penalty phase or death penalty trial, might be interesting when we're trying to say, okay, Tyler, the jury's found you guilty. What drove you to this? Is there anything that would take away from your being death worthy?
What do you think about that, Jules? Do you think that if you were at the bench, you were at the table, you could get this to not be a death penalty case?
Well, okay. Would that I were so good that I could predict my own success. All right. There are two parts of that question. One is, could I convince the prosecutor to not proceed? That would take a ton of work. And frankly, at some point, and this happens in the world, my or someone on my behalf going to talk to the Kirk family. And in a weird way, I think this prolonged preliminary hearing may have been also important for them in the sense they got this out, they got to see it, and they also know how painful a trial will be. That's part one. Part two, suppose, no, it goes to a jury. The jury comes back, aggravated murder. The answer is maybe. And it's a crapshoot. And the reason I say that is, number one, it depends on who those 12 jurors are and how relatively hard or soft they are on capital punishment. And number two, what other information we can dig up about Tyler. And this is what's in death penalty world. I know Mark is an expert in this. This is what's called mitigation. And mitigation has two things. One is find all the horrible things that happened to Tyler that left him susceptible to being in this position. And then number two, if you can, find one or two redeeming things about Tyler. And we know, especially in recent years, that in incredibly tragic, and there's no murder that's not tragic, but think of the Parkland case, okay? Multiple students, I think it was 17 deaths, and a lot of other people injured. 3 of the jurors, or 2 or 3, voted for life, and that was enough to do it.
And boy, do I know, because I had the next trial concerning the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. I represented Scott Peterson, not the one who killed his wife, but the alleged coward of Broward. And all the families were there, and they didn't get justice in the first case because he got life. So now they wanted Scott Peterson, my client, to pay for not going in and killing the killer when, candidly, they had no idea. He didn't really know where the shooter was located, and jurors found him not guilty on all 11 counts.
What role does it play, and how much of a role, that this is a young, stupid kid who, if they were to put him on the stand, which they probably won't, would come across as someone who wasn't an evil guy with an agenda, but a mixed up idiot with misplaced senses of righteousness. One, is there any chance they put him on the stand? And two, without him being on the stand, what role does his youth and really not being connected to anything other than his own stupidity as an agenda play a factor in whether or not they want his blood on their ledger as jurors?
It should all be considered. We don't know what weight, if any, the jurors individually will give. Nobody knows that. That's very personal. But the fact that he is young, the fact that he lacks priors, again, I could already hear the hate mail, like I'm advocating for life, but they're going to make the arguments that while the outcome, we all saw that video, was horrific, the act itself, the pulling the trigger, one shot, can that be plausibly analogized to some of the other cases that you go, my goodness, that is absolutely abhorrent and horrific? And some would say yes, and that's fine, but this will be a consideration for jurors. You know, you hear about some cases where people are getting death, and then again, are those facts plausibly analogized to the facts in this case, and does this case warrant the death penalty? And that's a very personal decision.
And we don't know yet. You know, I got to tell you, watching this guy, and I'll call him Guy, I make a mistake very often, which you guys will be sensitive to, which is I call all these people kids a lot. Because when you're in your early 20s, like that. To me, you are a kid. I've got a kid who's that age, and having
So do
been
I.
that age and now
They're
raising them
dopey.
that age,
They're still
you-
dopey. Yeah.
there ain't me. Okay.
Yeah.
They ain't a 40-year-old.
Mhm.
Okay. I mean, you could be a stupid 40-year-old, but they're not fully formed, and I'm not making any excuses. I'm explaining the fragility of human development. But, and I get beat up for that. But this guy, when I watched him at the hearing, he is not registering the kind of emotional attachment to reality that he should be. He's sitting in there kind of passive, making his notes, handing it to them. You may die for this. Like, there's a decent chance in Utah they're going to kill you, and they're definitely going to hook you. Your life is definitely over, and you are not showing it. And I wonder if that is a nod that there may be another chapter of this story that they plead diminished capacity, they plead diseased mind, they plead, NGRI, that there's something else to come on that. Or would we know already, Mark, because they would have done the testing on him already?
No, we're still early on. They're free to put forward any defense. This judge is going to give this case 4 to 5 years if the defense wants it. It's going to take a lot to work up the second component, the death portion of this, to find people he's ever said, God bless you to, anybody he's ever, helped cross the street, anything you can throw out there to save his life. That's what they're going to do.
I hate to say this, but that passivity can actually also boomerang. I mean, obviously, we're going to need people to explain it, but sometimes jurors see a guy sitting there like a lump of something and say, he doesn't give a fill in the blank. Let's kill him. I mean,
Yep.
This is what's bizarre, especially when you're dealing with young people. And I don't know, my clients were usually 18, right? So there are so many problems there. The real question is who's going to be able to paint that picture. And this is a weird thing in death penalty litigation. This is the one time the defense is trying to fragment the jury. We don't want unanimity. We want them fighting one another. We want jurors who don't get along because we're holding for that one person or two people who say, I'm not voting death.
Chris, one other reason for his demeanor in court may be
Yeah.
he already accepted his fate. In writing to his roommate, he wrote, I'm either going to be dead or facing a lengthy prison sentence, expressing regret why he couldn't return home, telling his partner. So he already knew, look, I'm either going to die or I'm going to prison for a long, long, long time. So he already knew. He knew that. So this is not a surprise. This is, okay, whatever, let's have fun. Let's, whatever, I got to go through this. Okay, whatever.
What is your read? Now, this is, is this forensic analysis, legal analysis? No, but there's a lot of psychology and sociology involved with prosecutions. And so the family got him to turn himself in. And that's always an interesting dynamic to me about what that says about how they see this young man, that they reached out to him. They were suspicious it was him. They were desperate to find him and to get him to turn himself in. What does that tell you, Jules?
It's susceptible to a few meanings. One is if we don't turn him in, he'll get shot and killed, right? So it's actually a very healthy thing as a parent to say, I want to control the surrender process. And I'm not saying police would deliberately do anything wrong, but we all know things can explode in a second. The other thing is it seems to arguably say that the family has some decent moral grounding.
And they don't see him as an evil monster who needs to go away, right? Because you don't make as much of an effort in those situations. Family's still family, but if somebody's a really bad guy, I don't know that you show the kind of desperation they did here. And what does it tell you, Mark, that he goes along with that? That he didn't want to do death by cop. He didn't have another caper in mind. He didn't have to run away after the shooting either. He obviously wanted to get away with it, right? Or did he? Like, what does it tell you?
It tells me that I've got something to use to try to save his life. I bootstrapped that with he turned himself in. He didn't, have some guns a-blazing and go on the run. He accepted responsibility, told his roommate / lover that he regrets it right away. It was impulsive. He wished he didn't do it. Yes, you concede it's abhorrent what he did. Yes, it's wrong. And yes, he should never get out of prison for the rest of his life. And he's not going to have an easy go of it in prison. That's where it should end. He shouldn't then get the death penalty. So I think those are good facts to help him. Maybe one juror goes, you know what? He did turn himself in. Yes, he did realize he had done wrong and even cried about it. Okay, that might be the one thing that gets to unlock that little safe with one of the jurors.
And I'm sorry. Well, the studies of capital jurors, right? This is an area that's actually been studied. Remorse is one of, if not the most important factor when a juror is deciding, do I vote death or do I vote life?
Mm-hmm.
I wish the judge hadn't delayed this until September. Justice delayed is justice denied. If you have somebody sitting in jail who doesn't deserve it, right, which can be a very nasty place. But I don't think that's the case in this case. If you had to go to trial today with what we know, including what the judge wouldn't let everybody see, but was used in court, do you think what is the likelihood this prosecution succeeds, Mark?
99.9999% if we're defining winning by getting a guilty as charged. I'm not so sure. The odds go down because, again, I know I've said it over and over again, because death is different. And all it takes is one juror. I'm not convinced even that it's Utah, even that they're death qualified, like Jules pointed out, because these are death qualified jurors. These are people who said, oh, I can give the death penalty under the right circumstances. That immediately gets rid of the flag waving liberals who might, spare his life regardless of the circumstances. They're gone. These people like, under the right circumstances, I could kill that guy over there. And those folks are going to be tough. But again, all it takes is one. So the odds, I would go down to maybe 75% that the prosecutor would be successful, because all it takes is one.
What do you think, Jules?
Based on everything we've seen now, and I looked at the cross-examination of the experts, yes, there's a minute chance it's someone else's DNA. Yes, there's a minute chance of something. Those don't add up a lot. I think that, okay, I have to back up. There could be a fight at the phase one. Are you guilty or not guilty? Again, on that degree. Is it murder or is it aggravated murder with the ingredient that in his mind at that moment, he knew, I'm not just shooting Charlie Kirk, I am creating a grave risk that others could be injured. Because that could be a place where the fight is fought. And then that actually has advantages in the penalty hearing, because you're not saying I didn't do it. You're just saying, please, it's really close on this one issue. And the jurors sometimes feel, you know what? We got our pound of flesh when we voted guilty. Maybe we can give the break on the penalty. So I think I'm with Mark on the numbers.
I like what Jules said. I'll throw in this one other possibility. You actually have to have this discussion with your client. Look, the evidence is overwhelming. And since, like expert Jules just said, jurors spare lives when people accept responsibility, what about doing what they did in the Parkland case? Say that I'm guilty, avoid the entire guilt phase, and just have a penalty phase. And jurors will know that he pled guilty, he spared them a lengthy trial, he accepted responsibility to the roommate, he's accepting responsibility now, he just deserves life. So there may be something to consider there, where he just accepts responsibility, he pleads guilty, and then just goes to the penalty phase. Because otherwise, you're really insulting them. What are you going to really argue with a straight face? So it may help you in the penalty phase.
You know, Utah has a reputation of being a harsh place when it comes to criminal justice, because they have the option of a firing squad there, which people see as brutal. By the way, I don't. If I had to get killed, and yes, I've probably thought about this too much, but I definitely would not go by lethal injection. I would much rather get shot in the head, personally, because every time, I mean, maybe it's my experience of just being around gunfire, you never even hear it before you see it, right? Because light moves faster than sound, but it happens before you even know it happened. So I don't see that as a savage, as a brutal, as a primitive thing, but people do. But when you look at the numbers, Utah is not a killing machine when it comes to how their juries resolve capital cases. There are a lot more capital cases or convictions of aggravated murder where they do not give the death penalty. I think it's only happened like a couple dozen times since 1970 something. Have they gone with the death penalty, even in a capital case? Obviously, it had to be a capital case, but there really is something here that just because you have a case doesn't mean a Utah jury is going to kill you.
Right. I bet the ones where they impose death, you start looking at multiple victims, child, rape, child murder, torture. And I'm not suggesting that what he did wasn't bad and abhorrent. We're just comparing the cases where people did get death versus life, because murder is wrong and murder in and of itself is bad and horrible. We got that. But what makes this so abhorrent? That's a personal question for the jurors.
And how many times did he shoot?
Right.
I mean, right? I mean,
how do you make these arguments and not have people go, again, I don't give a shit about the hate mail, but how do you not get people going, oh, you're minimizing it. You're just saying he only shot once, so it's not that big of a deal. That's what people are going to do. So it's
I'm just saying
or whatever.
within the specific context of arguing the aggravating factor, which is there were other people there.
Right.
What is the mitigator of the aggravator? The mitigator of the aggravator, Jules, is how can you say he wanted to kill a lot of people? He only fired once.
And apparently I hate to use the word skill here because this is all abhorrent to me, but with the capacity to aim at a particular individual.
To be distinguished from the fool who sprays.
Like the guy in Vegas.
Right?
Yeah,
there you
like
go.
the guy, like the Vegas shooter, who they never really figured out, by the way, which is why you have your conspiracies. And I'll tell you what mistake I'm not making, to Eiglarsh's point about the hate mail. And look, these days, here's what's sad. You want to hear another sad thing? It doesn't really matter if you hate Mark or if you love him, or if you hate me more reasonably, or love me. It doesn't really matter. It's all attention. It's
Jules, everybody hates you. Please,
it's an attention economy. It's an attention economy. It's all the same.
Yeah.
It's all the same. If you click on, because you're like, I hate this guy. It's a click. A click is a click is a click.
Right.
Our preference structure has been shot to shit, pun intended. The mistake I'm not making is the Bill Maher mistake, which was, and I'm a big fan of his and a friend. He said after 9/11, look, these guys, you can call them whatever you want. They're terrible people. They're not cowards. They flew and killed themselves in a building. I understand what he meant, but he's wrong. They are cowards, because taking life because you're going to take your own is not a brave action. It's a stupid action, but it's not a brave action. A brave action, courage, is where you put yourself into a situation where you're afraid, but you want to try to overcome it anyway. That's not what they were doing. That's not what a suicide bomber does. A suicide bomber knows they're going to die. There is a cowardice involved in that as far as I'm concerned, because bravery is, this is really dangerous. This is go really bad. I may not make it out of there, but I'm going to do it anyway and try to survive. That's not what they were. That's a mistake, is to paint an act of cowardice as some kind of courage or strength or toughness. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm saying that in the law, it's not that it wasn't that bad that he did it. It can't get any worse. I mean, if he had shot 10 people that day, it would be worse for those families. But in terms of how heinous a crime it is, I mean, it's tough to get much worse than this. And yes, if you could show that he went there and he shot and he tried to kill a lot more people, there is a better chance that he gets the death penalty. And the fact that he shot once is mitigation of that aggravating factor, because it just doesn't meet. Is there an aggravating factor, Jules, that you did it because of his beliefs, that you did it because of his politics, that you did it, on that level?
Not in the list of factors in the Utah statute. And that would also create all sorts of First Amendment problems, arguably. Utah does this, though. So Utah has its list of aggravating factors, and some states say, prosecutor, that's all you can do. Utah says once you've proved at least one of the listed factors, you may also introduce what are called non-statutory, non-listed. I still think the belief thing runs into some First Amendment problems. That's been litigated a little bit around the United States. I think a smart prosecutor wouldn't argue it. It would just be out there. It's what's called the atmospherics of this case. You don't have to say it. Mark's nodding his head, and he's prosecuted cases, right? There's sometimes you don't have to say it. And you don't want to say it because it creates a legal problem. But darn, it's in the water.
Jules is right. If this wasn't Charlie Kirk, let's say his name was Charlie Jones, and he's some random dude, and Tyler Robinson just wanted to shoot someone because he wanted to see what it felt like, or he didn't like what this random guy has been saying, but it wasn't Charlie Kirk, I don't even know if they'd be seeking the death penalty.
Yeah, but it's going to be part of the record, though, because you're going to talk about what was written on the bullets. You're going to talk about the text,
of course,
and it's all there.
He silenced his voice. That's an aggravator, whether it's a legal one or not.
Yeah, this is very interesting. I agree with you, Mark, that this delay was uncalled for, and I hope does not suggest what we see going forward in terms of allowing this to play out with all celerity of dispatch, because the longer it goes, the worse it is for everybody except the conspiracy peddlers. It works for them. Jules, thank you so much. Jules Epstein, I appreciate you. Mark Eiglarsh, I appreciate you. Thank you, each and both. Now, you can look at that conversation, study that conversation, and say, wow, they really covered everything. I mean, it really seems like this is what it's being presented to be. There's some wood to chop in terms of putting a case out there that all 12 jurors will be comfortable with as a capital case that is death penalty eligible. And maybe that will play out. Depends on how the victim's family feels, depends on how the prosecutors feel, depends on how the trial goes early on. Or you can say, there are still unknowns that make me really suspicious that this is about something more, because isn't it always? I will tell you this. Skepticism is real, can be useful, is a function of critical thinking, but it is the lowest level of critical thought. Skepticism is not the high form of, I don't know. I still feel like I know. Feelings aren't facts. Feelings aren't arguments. Okay. And at some point, there has to be a standard other than feeding your own need for grievance. And I get that can feel really empowering. No, I don't accept what they say. I don't accept what the government's telling me. I don't accept what the man's telling me. I don't accept what the cops are telling me. I don't accept what the prosecutor, fill in any power, whatever. Put it in there. There's something empowering about that. I reject it. Okay? You don't get me. Okay? You don't get me. I'm a real one. Okay, you can feel that way, but I'm telling you, you're making people money who aren't making sense. And it matters. Why? Because once you start to questioning things, question everything. Again, skepticism is a useful tool, but it shouldn't be the end point. It should be a starting point. And that's why I had it all laid out for you by people who this is what they do. And this is where they're not sure. And this is where they are sure. Okay. And I think both should be instructive to you. And we'll stay on this. We'll see what changes our analysis. We'll see what adds to the analysis. And we'll do it right here on CUOMO Crime Time. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for checking me out at Sirius Radio in the morning, NewsNation at night. Now, look, I'm not wearing my gear today, but a lot of you have asked about it, and I'll tell you, go and get the gear. There's a link. You can go and brand yourself as a critical thinker. Brand back against these mouth breathers and conspiracists. I'm different. Okay. I'm a free agent. I'm a critical thinker. I'm an independent. Okay. That's who we got to be now. All right. It's time for the citizenry to take back its agency. That's why we have these conversations. That's why we chew on it for ourselves. So we're not just accepting what is told us. Big twist in the House of Horrors case out of Ohio. The judge saying, hey, all this yip yap, time to shut it down. I'm going to gag this case, but not really. Not really. Really, just as it pertains to the elder of the family there. Really, but there's still stuff to mine. It does show, though, that the system is getting nervous about what's out there about this case and that it's so prejudicial. Well, the question is, should it be? I think a good way to look at the House of Horrors and what this means about the family involved, the siders, and who is the bad guy, or are there bad guys, or there bad guys and women? Are there victims among the adults involved, or an adult involved? Is that the mother who gave birth to all of these kids? Is there any theory of that? Have we ever heard of that before? Can it be that someone could treat kids this way as a mother and yet still be a victim? That is a very controversial thought. So how do we look at it? A good way to look at it is through the lens of what we have seen before. What have we seen like this? Ordinarily, I'd say nothing. I've never seen anything like this before. But yes, I have. Yes, I have. There are several cases of abductions over time, systematic abuse, perverse, depraved abuse, prolonged years, but not this many people. And not by people who are trying to have it where this isn't trafficking. This isn't a set up system of to destroy these children. That even if misplaced, there's a belief that they were doing something else. And that is the Turpin family case. Do you remember that? David and Louise Turpin, arrested on January 4th, 2018, after one of their daughters, a 17-year-old, escaped out of a window from their home in California, a remote part of California, Paris, California, and called 911. Her call led police to discover that she and her alleged 12 siblings, her 12 siblings, had allegedly suffered years and years of severe abuse and neglect. And of course, they did. The Turpins had 13 kids, aged 2 to 29. Investigators found that many of the kids were extremely malnourished, isolated, living in unsanitary conditions. Some had been restrained to beds for long periods. Bathing was an irregularity. Neighbors saw the kids, though. Neighbors knew they had kids, knew the kids were there, and the kids were weird, but that they didn't know how bad it was. Same thing you hear with the House of Horrors in Ohio, except there, neighbors barely knew they had any kids, never saw the kids. And there, the situation wound up being a really weird control dynamic. That's what it was for the Turpins. And that's why they did it. It was very unsatisfying to me. And never really made sense, never really bought it, but that's how it was adjudicated. So what lens does that give us into this case? Well, we have two incredible opportunities today. One, we're going to talk to one of the main investigators on the Turpin case. What led to the greatest discoveries there? What mattered? What was relevant in the analysis of how bad this was, what motivated it, and what you have to look for to make the case, as obvious as it may seem. Then we'll flip it. Maybe it's not the Turpin case. Maybe it's not what it seems, at least not for everyone involved in the House of Horrors. Maybe not for the mother, which for me, on one level, would be the hardest thing to believe. Why? Because she's the one who gave birth to all these kids, and you would think that she would be the most invested in their well-being. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's something else to it. How do we know? Well, while there is a gag order for Gary Siders Jr., after his attorney argued that statements made by public officials created a substantial risk of prejudicing potential jurors, that he may not get a fair trial. They put a gag. The attorneys for the other family members criticized the officials' comments as inflammatory, but they are not gagged. And that is an amazing opportunity for us. And why? Because it allows us to have the attorney for the mother, Elizabeth Siders. Is she a victim? Is that possible? Is it probable? Is there any reason to believe it? Who would know better than her attorney, who has now had some time to familiarize himself with this case that he did not have when he did his first interview on TV after this case, which was with me. And I told then that attorney, Mr. Tommy Stolley, that I would give him the opportunity. And now I will give him an even better opportunity. I will let him listen to my interview with the Turpin investigator, somebody who knows what to look for in these cases, knows what mattered then and what should matter now, and what he thinks will matter here and what he sees in this situation. He is retired Master Investigator, Mr. Tom Salisbury. And Tom joins me now and joins me first. Tom, thank you for taking the opportunity.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you also.
So, how surprising that not only would you see something like it again, because when the Turpin came out, I'd never heard anything like that before, but that really, it's just several years later, here we are again. How surprised were you to hear of the House of Horrors?
I couldn't believe it when I first heard it, based on the number of children, 16 children, and the age of the parents, and the manner in which they were kept. And I think I first heard about it through the press release.
Take us back to the Turpin case first, for your perspective on this. When you got involved, how did you get your hands around what you needed to look at in that case, and remind people what your role was and why you took it?
I was the on-call investigator for our agency, the Riverside County Sheriff's Department in Southern California. We contract with the city of Paris, and I got called out by a sergeant on the scene. You probably saw him in one of the body-worn camera videos. And he said, I have 13 kids, 2 parents. We came in the house, and one of them was still chained up, and another showed evidence of having just been chained up. So I directed him to get the parents to the station, separate interview rooms, and get the 13 kids to the station, and call for immediate medical aid and personnel to assess the children. At the same time, I called CPS and asked for as many CPS responders as they could send me. It was a holiday weekend, so I had to rely on 3 assistants. 2 were not even detectives, but they were part of my robbery burglary suppression team. And the 4th had just gotten to the Bureau days earlier from being a school resource officer for 5 years. So there wasn't a lot of experience in those of us that had to deal with it. But within minutes, within seconds of walking into the station and seeing the kids, I knew it wasn't going to be pretty.
Now, the Turpins, the 13 children, 2 to 29 years of age, first, were they all their biological children?
Yes, yes.
And what was the role of foster care in this? Just for people to understand the context. This is not in play in the House of Horrors with the Siders in Ohio, but was this about where they were placed after they were discovered in there, or had they been in, what was the context there?
Okay, so the context is I recognize state protocols would separate the adults from the children.
How does a 29-year-old get held against their will by their own parents? Help people understand how once you get over, those preteen years, how does it work as a psychological and of course, criminal dynamic that allows people to still be controlled even when they're adults?
For the fear of what would happen to them if they didn't do exactly what they were told.
Meaning,
that
what
is-
what shape did that take here, and how did it manifest in a way that was compelling to a 29-year-old, a 20-year-old, an 18-year-old? Was it that these people, were they compromised in terms of their intelligence or their mental health, or do you think it was just conditioning, or both?
No, I think it was mostly mental. I mean, obviously they were severely malnutritioned, severely. But you got to remember, the older they were, the longer they had lived in these conditions. And so the 29-year-old, for instance, had known that at one point she and some of her older siblings lived in a beautiful suite 45 miles away from her mom and dad, and a bunch of children that were placed into a trailer by themselves with a barely 16-year-old watching them and answering to mom and dad, who only dropped off food once every 2 weeks or so.
What did you discover was the motivator here for the Turpins? Why were they doing this?
I'm going to go with, and definitely not intelligence related, but mental health. Totally mental health. Their 2.5 car garage was over knee to thigh high with brand new toys, bikes, skateboards, anything a kid could want, which weren't opened. Yet inside of the bedrooms were notepads with handmade Monopoly boards and stuff like that. So there would be dessert left on the counter that the kids weren't allowed to have. Meanwhile, all they're having are bread and bologna and pimento sandwiches. So and you're right. You saw that interview with Jordan, who didn't even know what a corner was, who didn't even know what a street sign was, who initially read her zip code as her address, didn't even know what an address was, didn't know what medication was.
I just ran away from home.
Okay.
And I live in a family of 15.
Okay.
My 2 little sisters right now are chained up.
They're chained up?
Yes,
Where are they chained up at?
on the bed. Now, mother didn't chain them up just to be mean. Okay. They're chained up because they stole mother's food.
Uh-huh.
But I'm sorry if I talk too much. Okay. I've never talked to anybody out there, so I've never been alone with a person, so this is very hard for me to talk. Okay.
How do your parents know you left your house?
No, they don't. So,
Do you take any medication?
what's medication?
Medication?
Yeah, what's medication?
Do you take pills? Do you take pills?
Oh, I
For-
don't think I've ever taken a pill before.
So although they didn't have a lot of outside of the house experience, they self-taught each other and thrived off each other's knowledge in the house. And the fact that Jordan even had the whereabouts to take pictures of her siblings who were chained up right before they left the house, that, you saw the deputy's reaction. As soon as he saw that, he was like, oh my gosh, okay, yeah.
So had any of the kids ever been out or in school, or they were all homeschooled, they were all controlled all the time?
Actually, the oldest, I believe he was 25-year-old son, was actually had gone to college out there recently, a community college. And mom would drive him out there and sit outside the classroom and drive him home. But he was one of the least talkative during the initial interview. And I'll say that initial interview because we talked to him just hours after they were all removed from the home. So
Did he bear any responsibility, or was he pure victim in your opinion?
he's a pure victim, but make no mistake about it, they were instructed and directed and punished if they didn't act as security guards. So they had 4 kids in each bedroom and the 2-year-old in mom and dad's room. And there was responsibility within each of those rooms. And so the kids were actually, the older kids were the ones that fed the younger kids, that make sure they didn't sneak out of their room, that made sure they didn't take any food or hide any food that didn't belong to them. So it was much like a jail or a prison system, where if they didn't report to mom and dad that the other kids were doing wrong, those kids would get punished, and the monitoring kids would get punished.
And for the husband and wife, when you say it was mental, do you think that they're crazy? Do you think that they're evil? Do you think it's a touch of both? What do you think their motivation was here?
Well, according to mom, it was disciplinary related. But one could obviously see from the totality of facts and totality of statements that all those kids gave that no, it was mental health combined with a special kind of evil, the kind of evil that isn't beating someone until they're near death. It's emotionally abusing them and infiltrating their mind regarding every aspect of their life.
Was there ever any, first of all, is it more the wife than the husband or the wife, or was it equal in your opinion?
Well, I believe their statements, and their statements were that the chaining of the kids were both their ideas. And so they went from ropes, which the kids were able to escape from, to small chains, which the kids were able to escape from, to medium chains, which the kids were able to escape from, to the thicker chains. And those chains had to be locked on a certain link. Because if mom checked them and they weren't locked on that second link, that specific link, then yeah, there would be punitive action taken against the children.
And Louise never claimed that David made me do it.
No, never.
And
she said it was both their idea.
what do you do if the grandparents have dementia? You know, you interview them, it is what it is, and they're going to get tested. To the extent that Gary Siders Jr., the one with the indecent exposure stuff, the one who's supposedly the biological father of these kids. Now, you're going to know all that too. That's just DNA. They're going to find out who's the daddy and who's the mommy. So they'll know if there's any overlap with the grandparents and the parents here. So you'll get that piece. But after that, what kinds of interviews, assuming that they're at all cooperative, because they could just say, no, we're not talking to you. Charge us if you want to charge us. But what are those interviews like with the parents?
The interviews with the parents is very difficult. And I was in law enforcement for 42 years, Chris. And my theory was, no matter what the case, always treat people like I would want my family treated if they were in that situation. And I would say I got statements. I won't call them confession. I got statements 95% of the time, not by browbeating people, not by threatening them, but just talking to them and conversating with them and building up rapport with them and learning about their life before whatever events happen. And most of those events were related to special victim unit type crimes, including child deaths, infant deaths.
Yes, but here they're lawyered up.
Yeah,
so
you're not going to be able to talk to them unless it is through their attorney, and that's not unheard of, because sometimes clients want to explain to their attorney why what happened, and then the attorney will sometimes use their best judgment depending on the law enforcement agency or maybe even the specific detective involved, and tell them, yes, let's go give the police a statement. It'll be a limited statement. We'll stay within this box, but they need to hear what you have to say.
Why do the
another-
police, why is it in their interests to tell the police anything?
It all depends. So I had a case one time where a severely handicapped 15-year-old girl sadly passed after years and years of issue. And so no one knew the exact cause of her death until the autopsy. And it turned out she had a care provider that had put a studded earring in her ring in her ear, which somehow the backing came off. It went down her throat. It lodged in there. It turned into a severe medical condition because no one detected that. And then she ended up dying. And so as an investigator, I got called out just on that case because of the type of death. And they wanted to know if mom and dad intentionally caused it. And so after reviewing all the facts and circumstances and finding out the background information that I found out without even talking to the parents, I then contacted the attorneys, the parents. The parents consulted with the attorney, and the attorney brought them to the station.
Mm.
And
But
it
they
was
knew
all-
that they knew they hadn't done anything wrong.
right, but they
You know
didn't
what I
know
mean?
what had happened.
Right.
They didn't
right.
know what had happened either, so they wanted answers too.
So it's interesting. What does it mean to you that the mother, as far as we understand it, and she does say, my understanding, I'll check it with her attorney, but that, yeah, these are all my kids. And there are hospital records saying that she's the mother of record, which would be hard to fake because obviously the healthcare professionals are there. She wants to be reunited. She wants to cooperate with the court. She keeps asking about the welfare of her children. How do you read that kind of desire from the mother? Does it make it more likely that she's a victim in this, or what?
I don't know her mental health status or her complete background. I've just heard tell that she doesn't come from a great family background herself. So, and the fact that, there was pregnancy and birth after pregnancy and birth, I think that may say something about her mental health, knowing that probably after the first two, there was no means to provide for these children.
Mm.
But that doesn't mean that she didn't love them in her own way, not the way you or I would love our kids and care for our kids. She may have loved them, but she could have taken care of them better. It doesn't cost anything for cleanliness.
Can you love someone? Can you be Can you be sane, mentally competent, and have kids in the condition that these kids reportedly were?
No. And to me, that would be a near impossibility. She might have had the love and she might have had the want, but she didn't have the means and she didn't apply anything. Otherwise, the police would have walked in there and found 12 children in a clean room.
Mm.
Not a feces-laced, urine-soaked room.
And when you remember the Turpin, how was the mother's disposition towards the kids once they were separated from her in that case?
She loved them and wanted to be reunited with them. And at the early onset in 2018, they loved their parents. They were the only parents they had ever known. Everyone from the 29-year-old down to the youngest loved their parents. And they wish their parents hadn't treated them like they had.
What is the chance that not all of these four people, the adults, who have been, fingered as suspects in abuse and worse of these kids. What's the chance that they don't all get the same treatment legally?
I think there's a high likelihood that the biological parents are going to be held more to a higher standard and accountability than the grandparents, despite the fact, in my mind, the grandparents had more life experience and should have known better.
Assuming that they're not mentally deficient, either by disease or diminished capacity. Have you ever seen a case where kids were in the kind of condition that's reported here and the parents weren't found criminally responsible?
No. I mean, we're talking kids so malnutrition, they were on the verge of death and had to be airlifted to the hospital. That's severe child neglect. That's felony child neglect.
And the idea of why, I know that motive isn't part of a prosecution, but it is a big part of doing an investigation. Means, motive, and opportunity in terms of trying to assess a crime are fundamentals for you guys. When you look at the House of Horrors, as it's being called, and the attorney for Elizabeth Siders will certainly say that that is a mischaracterization. How important is motive, and what does it look like from what you've seen so far?
At this point, I believe there's several reasons why it happened. And maybe some of them are monetary related, economical related, lack of money. But Chris, you know as well as I do, there's free healthcare out there. I mean, I'd like to know if any of them ever went to the doctors for anything. You know, there's opportunities for childcare money out there and feeding these kids out there. Our society isn't broken down so much that we're going to let 2 kids starve in one house if they don't have any food, much
Right.
less 16. You
Right.
know, and judging from the Turpin case, the Turpins used to tell me how it deeply emotionally impacted them and affected them for life, hearing their siblings cry in those chains and not being able to do anything about it. That's torturous, not only to the victim chained up, but to the other siblings who had to listen to that every night.
Are you, given what you learned from Turpin and your experience within the system, were you surprised to hear that whether it was Vinton County, you know, we don't know yet why they showed up at the house. It may have been about the indecent exposure cases. It may have been about something else. We don't know yet. We haven't really gotten a clear picture of that from the authorities yet. But does it shock you that these people were able to move around in Ohio for this long without being detected by neighbors or any kind of government agency?
Well, their house was, it sounds like it was very rurally isolated. No direct neighbors, unlike the Turpins who had neighbors on all 3 or 4 sides of them, 5 if you want to count all the houses around them. And it sounded like the train tracks maybe separated them from the Dollar General, but the Dollar General people knew about the kids. They took up donations and stuff for the kids. I'm really surprised that no one ever reached out to any child protective service agency or some kind of assistance, just an assistance agency or a church or someone goes, hey, these kids have nothing.
Now, is that something for the defense? That, hey, look, the family knew. There are other people around who saw them. Nobody ever called the cops on us because they knew we weren't trying to hurt them.
Well, if you weren't trying, you did a pretty good job, Chris, because having been disciplined by my parents for bad choices I made when I was a kid, I can tell you that that type of physical abuse for discipline does not, the physical abuse is minor compared to the mental and emotional torture that those kids went through.
Does it matter? Let's say they don't have compelling evidence that the kids, that it was like Turpin, that they weren't chained, they weren't tied up. Maybe they were even allowed to move around a lot. And that 12 by 12 room was actually their bathroom because there's so many of them. And there was only one bathroom in the house. So it's the best that they could do. And when they came in to get the kids, there were a couple of young kids that weren't well supervised who had gotten some shit on them because they were in that room. But they were allowed to move. They were allowed to go outside. Does that change it?
It would look better for them, but I don't think it would change the totality of the circumstances. No, not in the least.
What questions would you have that you want to be answered in this case?
I'd want to know from the parents, what, if any, efforts they made toward gaining any nutritional assistance for these kids. Did they ever take them to a doctor, a dentist? Did they ever provide them something that would look positive upon them, like taking them outside to play? Tell me about those times. When I do my interviews, I did global interviews. I just didn't want the bad stuff, the stuff I can use against you or might be used against you. I would repeatedly ask people if there's anything positive I can put in the report on their behalf. And I try to look at it from different perspectives. And one of the perspectives I look at it from also, though, Chris, is not just mom and dad's perspective, the grandparents' perspective, but most importantly, the kid's perspective. That's the side I would take the longest look at.
Well, I have to tell you, I'm sure that you never thought, Tom, that you would be looking at another case like this again, but your experience with Turpin is very helpful to us in understanding what we're dealing with this Siders family and these 16 kids. So I appreciate you. And as we learn more, I'm sure I'm going to do more on this. And I look forward to talking to you about it again. Tom Salisbury, thank you very much for being with me.
Thank you, Chris Cuomo.
I want to go, and I've allowed or given the opportunity, and the opportunity was taken by counsel Tommy Stolley, Esquire, who is the attorney for the mother, Elizabeth, and she says that she is the mother of all 16 kids found living in what are described as deplorable conditions. And he is representing her. And he said to me when we first met, look, I just met her. I'm just getting into the case. But already I can tell you that I believe there have been gross mischaracterizations. Already I can tell you that I have enough experience to know that this woman is not a monster, and she's talking about her kids in a way that a mother who cares about her kids would. And I said, well, then let's do this. Take some time, go get to know the record. You are welcome to come back and make the case as you find it at that time. He said, okay. I didn't really mean it. And then he called me on it. No, I'm kidding. Of course I meant it. And that's why Mr. Stolley joins me now. Counsel, thank you for taking the opportunity.
Chris, thanks for having me. I'll notice that you did not call it the House of Horrors when it was my turn to speak on this. You referred to it as deplorable conditions, but refrain from House of Horrors. I can appreciate that.
Well, look, that is what the media is calling it. And, you know, the stylized version of stories is part of the court of public opinion, different than the court of law. You are free to object to its use. I understand. But the challenge for you is to prove to me that I shouldn't use that term. What have you learned since we last spoke that has informed your position that the way this is being covered is not reflective of the reality?
Well, Chris, I want to start out by first and foremost saying I listened to Tom's piece. I understood what he had to say in regards to the Turpin case. Tom has the benefit at this point of having the Turpin case having been litigated. They have taken pleas. That case is over. The evidence played out in a court of law. The evidence will play out in a court of law in this case too. At this point, we are still so very early on here. My client has still not been indicted. The prosecutor has not decided when exactly they're going to present this case to a grand jury. I don't know what charges are going to be brought before the grand jury. The defense is not part of that. So my discussions here, once again, will be informed by my perceptions, having talked to my client, the facts to the extent that we have them, and then doing the best of that I can to distinguish this case from cases like the Turpins, because I understand, much like you're saying, this case is being discussed this way in the media. So people are naturally drawing those comparisons. I think, go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
Put some meat on the bones. What have you learned in discussions with your client that makes you feel it's not a Turpin case, other than what you're right about, but it's just unsatisfying in terms of correcting the perception that, hey, it hasn't gone to trial yet. True. I respect that. As an officer of the court, I respect that. You're right. Due process matters. Yes, it doesn't matter to people's opinions. And they don't need to know anything to have an opinion. And that's the difference between where we are right now and where you want to be, which is within the system. And you're right about the system, but we're outside the system. And when people see what they've been told about the kid's situation, don't they already know enough to believe that this was a grotesquely wrong situation?
Okay, so let's break it down piece by piece. First and foremost, we're talking about the Turpins. This was a case where there were restraints used. Tom went into detail about the restraints, the different types of
chained them up.
Yeah, chained these kids up.
Yeah.
There, a pure and simple distinction here is the fact that one of the first pieces of evidence that came out in this case from the prosecutor of Vinton County was the fact that there was no evidence of restraints, no evidence of ropes or ties, no chains, no cages. There was no evidence that these kids were in any way confined in this home. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the punishments that the Turpins would inflict upon their children. That right there is a patent distinction from this case. There is no evidence at this point that these kids were punished in any way for trying to leave the home, that these kids were punished for trying to come out of the room. In fact, there's no evidence that these kids were not free to move about the house to the extent that it existed. And I think one of the most grotesque things about the Turpin case is the fact Tom alleged that they didn't have much. They lived in a middle to upper middle class home in Southern California. The notion that they didn't have much is false, especially when compared to the Siders family. Vinton County is one of the poorest, if not the poorest, county in the state of Ohio. It reflects a lot of Southeast Ohio, but seriously, this home is isolated. It is far away from the neighbors. So let's look at the house. The Turpins made choices. They had a depiction of their family online. Those were their choices. That's why people didn't know what was going on in that home, was because they portrayed this folksy family image online. They made sure that all the kids had matching outfits. They made sure that the pictures of the kids at Disney were posted on Facebook. They made sure that people saw them purchasing these lavish toys and stuff that Tom was referring to. These things were stuffed in their garage. So the Turpins made choices, and they had the money to make those choices. And their choices were wrong, and that's why that case...
But even if the Turpins are worse, it does not relieve the onus of your client and her relatives being terrible. Are you saying that at this point you believe that your client has done nothing wrong?
Well, Chris, when you have a situation where a family cannot afford to take care of children, or there are home conditions that are not appropriate for children, there is an action. There is a legal action for that. In the state of Ohio, it's called a dependency action. There's a dependency action in this case. I happen to be Elizabeth's attorney in that action as well. It is not necessarily felony child endangerment. So these kids, the Siders' children, were removed not through the felony case, but they were removed through the juvenile court proceeding. That is the dependency case in this matter. That's where the agency is involved. And that's where I see lots of these cases play out. I'm an attorney that practices frequently in Southeast Ohio. I see these cases. I have cases not dissimilar to this one where, because it did not receive the media attention, my clients are not being painted as monsters.
The guys who investigated this case, Tommy,
Yep.
were horrified by what they saw, and this is what they do.
It really looked third world. It's the type of thing that we're not used to seeing here in America.
And, you know, one of the things that this clinician pointed out to me in assessment of these things, which is a powerful perspective, poverty is real. Poverty can be crippling. And people keep having kids because it gives them an avenue to dignity, not because they're working the system for more money or anything like that, but sometimes it's just all they have in their lives, so they keep doing it. But a huge red flag is when you see the parents in one condition and the kids in another. And by all accounts, these kids, nonverbal, almost feral, covered in shit, you know, never in school, never to a doctor, and the parents relatively healthy, means they made one set of choices for them and another set of choices for the kids. How do you escape that here?
So, Chris, I think actually I take issue with some of that, because I'm not sure that the parents were living in any different conditions. We do not know at this point the health conditions of the kids. I don't even know that, and I represent Elizabeth in the dependency action. We will get that information. That's something I will be privy to in that case. We also don't know the status of the parents' health conditions. What we do know is that all of the Siders, the 16 children and the 4 adults, were all living in that home together. So whatever the conditions were, they were all living in that home.
Right, but you know more than that. You know that the kids were found to be malnourished. The kids have no medical records. The kids were never in school. That a couple of the kids require such extreme medical help that they were afraid the kids weren't going to survive, several of them, not just one. Even accounting for her father-in-law's diminished capacity, none of them checked those boxes. You know plenty. They may not have been proven in a court of law beyond a reasonable doubt at this point, but the idea that you have nothing to go on is a little disingenuous. No, counsel?
Well, Chris, it's standard procedure. Whenever there's an investigation like this, and particularly when children are removed from a home, to have them evaluated. Mm-hmm. It would be inappropriate of me to discuss the medical conditions, because I don't know.
But the Attorney General knew, and he said another 24 hours could have resulted in 1 or more deaths. Most of our livestock are kept in better conditions. He'd never seen anything like it in all his years of doing this. Extreme neglect, almost feral. You think he's just making it up?
Well, Chris, we've already debunked the myth that these kids were almost feral. The ones that were of appropriate age had social media pages. There's evidence of that online now. We've debunked that. These kids could talk. They spoke when the police came in. These kids, you have to remember, were terrified when police officers, multiple police officers from multiple agencies with a battering ram came in serving this search warrant. That was the axis of approach coming into this house. So these kids, as any kids would be, were terrified.
So you're saying that some of them can speak?
Yes.
And have you had a chance to speak to any?
I have not, Chris.
But the mother confirms this to you. That's where you're getting it from.
Yes.
She says they can speak. They'll be able to communicate.
Yes.
Do you think that makes it better or worse for your client?
I think it dispels a lot of the nonsense that we've seen about this case. So, Chris, I mean, if we're talking about feral children, those are children who do not understand the world. Those are children who we really would want to examine the conditions in which they were living for some sort of abuse. If the kids can speak, I think that changes the analysis. If the do you see what I mean there?
Oh, no, listen, I hear you, but I'm just saying, you're going on what the mother told you. So according to the mom, you don't have a reason to believe at this point, because you haven't gotten any of the records yet. I understand that. I'm giving you that space because if you haven't been given it to you yet, you don't really have to invest any credibility in it, especially in your position. I'm okay with that. But according to the mother, she doesn't believe that any of the kids were close to death or even that sickly. She doesn't believe that any of them were covered in feces or in any way that makes it look like they were incredibly abused. She doesn't believe that they're non-communicative and incredibly malnourished to the point of physical extreme illness.
Well, I will certainly answer the feral children remark, the kids being non-communicative. My mom, my client, the mom of these children, absolutely disputes that. And I want to go back to a point that you had made earlier, Chris. You were talking about these things that we're talking about. We know how the Attorney General described the case.
Right.
The biggest piece of issue that I'm taking with this is the fact that the Attorney General didn't know what he was talking about when he made these statements. We don't know that he went in the home. We have no evidence that the Attorney General went into the home. We know investigators went into the home. The Attorney General made these remarks and made, frankly, inappropriate remarks prior to a thorough investigation being done. So I don't want to come on here and be disingenuous with you and tell you, well, mom thought X, Y, and Z, or this was the case until I have that information. My office is in the process of gathering that information. That's what we would do in any criminal case. But here, there's a lot of evidence to gather. And I want to make sure that I'm very clear when I say we will do that. We will get the answers.
Oh, listen, I don't have any question about it. Look, I feel that you're being, in our practice, they'll often say, are you being too cute by half? Maybe, maybe not. We'll see. But we're going to know what the condition of the kids were. We're going to know because they're going to have been independently evaluated in real time, and it will have been documented, and we'll know their size, their weight, their blood, and what's going on. We're going to know that. What we won't know necessarily is why this happened the way it did. Now, at this point, do you understand better your client's role in the treatment of these kids? Do you understand that she was able to make the choices for them that she thought were right, or was she in any way controlled in this dynamic?
Chris, I don't know that I have an answer as to the dynamics within the home beyond my client. I can tell you what my client has told me, which we've said here before. She loves these kids. It's very clear from our interactions that she absolutely loves these kids. And she has very fond things to say about the stuff that they would do around the house, the stories that they would tell, the interactions that they would have that seem like normal family interactions.
But what is her explanation for the abnormal? Did she try to get them medical help? Did she try to get intervention and help for food? Did she say that my husband wouldn't let me, or he made this happen and he told me if I didn't, then I'd never? Is there any explanation that goes with how the kids wound up in the situation that they were found?
Well, we have not gotten to that point. That is going to be a discussion that I have with my client once we actually have the evidence, because I'm not able to speak intelligently with her about what the conditions were. I have the information that's been reported. But what I will say on that point, Chris, is this is very clearly a case where my client and the Siders family were living in extreme poverty. And
yes,
sometimes when you're living in a case like that, you're living in a home and that's what you've known for years and years, you don't necessarily see how bad things have gotten. You don't necessarily see this the way that the rest of the world would. And this is truly the case in Southeast Ohio, where someone like you or I, Chris, would look at this and say, all right, I wouldn't live in this house. I wouldn't allow my children to sleep in a bed that looks like that. Or, I would not allow my children to do whatever it is. But that's different for people who have lived a different reality.
Yes, but the question is, where they live in a different reality within a different reality, which is what they exposed their kids to, where they have a legal responsibility. Does it bother you that your client doesn't look underweight, her husband doesn't look underweight, and the in-laws don't look underweight? And there is, unless they're all wrong, right? I mean, is it possible? Yeah, it's possible. But if these kids all wind up being incredibly malnourished and underweight, doesn't that give you some cause for concern?
Well, I'll speak directly as to my client, Chris. My client does look underweight. She
Not to me.
Okay. My client, I physically sat with her in the jail. I'm seeing someone who is thin, is pale, is emaciated. And so
Has she been evaluated? She's been in the system for a bit now. Do you get medical treatment there?
I don't know, because I have not seen her jail records in terms of the medical evaluation.
But counsel, you would know if she had been examined, and the system has a responsibility upon it and a liability if they do not, or if they fail to get her necessary emergency medical treatment. So if she was really malnourished, it would have been developed by this time, and you would know. Isn't that true?
So we don't have any information regarding emergency medical treatment at this point. I'm sure that a routine medical evaluation was done at the jail. I have not seen the results of that.
But if she were in crisis, you would likely know, and some of the kids were hospitalized and kept there in crisis. That's why I'm drawing the distinction.
Well, right. But the thing is we don't actually know what the condition the kids were in. We know that the kids were taken and evaluated, and potentially some of them were taken to the hospital. We don't know what hospital. We don't know what the conditions were. We don't know the durations of the stay to the extent that they happened.
Right.
So from my client's perspective, no, I don't. That she didn't go to the hospital. I believe she's been evaluated in the jail, but I don't have access to those records.
I got you.
Also,
go ahead, Tommy. Two other things, and I appreciate you. And by the way, the invitation extends, okay? As you guys develop more things and you want a platform, I'm going to be a fair broker on it. Why? Because the truth is always enough. That's why. That's why I don't have an agenda on this other than what should be obvious to everybody. Poor, often out of your control. Poor, often out of your control. Clean, rarely out of your control. I come from a family of people who were very, very poor. Very poor. Not dirty. Never find a house, a room in the tenement that they lived in that had shit all over it. How does she explain that condition in this home?
well, Chris, did you grow up with 16 kids in your home?
Nope. But
Okay.
I can tell you, there could have been 36.
Right.
There would have been no room covered in shit in any house that they were in.
All right. Well, we have not seen the evidence, so we don't know to the extent. I know what was said by investigators, and I can appreciate that. But I am taking that with a grain of salt at this point until we actually see the discovery. I would like to see the condition of this home. I would like to see the floors. I would like to see the bedding. I would like to see where these kids were interacting on a day-to-day basis.
So why haven't you gone?
What my client tells me, Chris, is that
Why haven't you gone out there, Tommy Stolley? How busy are you?
Well, very busy, Chris. But in addition to that, this home is an active crime scene. The investigators are completing their investigation. The prosecutors have not yet gone to the grand jury proceedings on this case. So the investigation is not done even from a law enforcement perspective, let alone from a legal defense perspective. So
Right.
it wouldn't be routine of me to go out at this point. One of the things that's truly concerning to me are these supposed images that are coming out of the home, to the point that I asked the prosecutor about it in person. I said, were images released of the house? He said no. What about the
Well,
videos? He
I
said,
will let you know what I see. Although these days, just because I see it doesn't mean that it's real.
right.
But I'm happy to relay it because we'll want comment on it, obviously. And has she given you an explanation that way? Like, what do you mean they're saying there was shit and piss all over that room? No way, that's not true. Has she said that to you?
Well, what she said to me is that with 16 kids, things could get messy fast. So I don't know more beyond that, and I'm not.
Right, but messy. Look,
Well,
we're both in the family game. Messy's messy. It's not like she had 16 Rottweiler puppies. You know, these were human beings. You know, there's a bathroom in the house. You're supposed to use it. That is going to be a very low bar. Right. For people's estimation of what this is. My other question, go ahead, Tommy. Give me your comment, and then I got one other question.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think the important distinction here is you and I could even agree that the conditions in this home were not good, that the conditions in this home were not something that you and I would live in. I think we could probably agree on that right here, right now, no discovery.
I would say anybody should live in. If they are half of what has been described, then it was not habitable and it was abusive. If it's half of what was described. But to your point, I don't know. But if they're all that wrong, you're in good shape. If investigators are that grossly incorrect, you're in good shape.
Well, I mean, when they use language like they've used, it is impossible not to draw those comparisons. It's impossible not to have those images evoked in your mind. Of course, it sounds disgusting. So the difference is, and the important point is, yes, we might not want to live in this home, but does that make it criminal? And that is the answer that we don't have at this point.
Understood. And we won't have for some time.
That's why we have the presumption of innocence.
100%. 100% due process, brother. That's all that matters to me. I believe that those are the two most important words when it comes to the administration of justice in our country, due process. As long as there's due process, everything else will take care of itself. Things can still go sideways and often do, but that's what matters most. And to the extent that I can, I give you due process as an instrument of fairness, which is my standard. I'm not objective. No human being is, let alone one who's a parent and has lived a long time and seen a lot of cases the way I have. It's hard for me to be objective. I don't really even want to be objective. I want to be fair. And the last question that's a fair question to ask, even at this point, when someone is now safe from who they were with, okay, because she is not being held with her husband, and he absolutely has automatically more exposure than she does, no pun intended, although now that I said it, it's pretty clever, because of the cases against him, and you do not represent him. One of the first things that she would have communicated to you and everybody else is, thank God I'm away from him. This is all him. Thank God we're all safe now. Have you gotten any indication of that from your client?
Chris, I would put a big asterisk and a maybe by that comment. Maybe she would have said that. But the idea of victimhood here is not singular. Not every victim is the same. We've had this discussion before. My client doesn't see herself as a victim at this point. Now, we're looking into that. That is something that we're absolutely looking into. That's going to take time. There are instances where people are removed from situations where it takes a long time for them to come to a different reality, for them to realize that they are out of that space, that they are in a safe space. Right now, my client has been through a tough couple weeks. She's been removed from her children. She's sitting in jail. She's not privy to the information that you and I are, even if some of that information is really tough to digest, at least in the allegations. So at this point, it's going to take time. It's going to take professional evaluations by people who are more qualified than me, who are able to make determinations on trauma, on some of the circumstances that led her to being where she's at.
Has she been able to communicate with her husband?
I have no information about that. I would say no for several reasons. Well, I'd say no because she's in jail. and 2, because there's a no contact order.
Why is there a no contact order between the parents?
Well, I can only comment on my client's case. I will not make any comment with regards to any other of the
Okay.
side cases.
With yours, why is there a no contact?
Standard in any criminal proceeding where they're co-defendants.
And does she have any information about how many different homes the kids are in right now and how many have gotten out of the hospital?
No. And Chris, I don't even have that information. I would probably be the first to get that information. As we're
Well, counsel, I remain a call away and at your disposal to give any new information that changes or enhances the perception of this case, because people are paying attention for obvious and for good reason. This is a good test of the system, and I appreciate you participating in it.
Well, Chris, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come on and for us to have this discussion.
All right, and that invitation is open and continues. So, Tom Stolley, I look forward to speaking to you again.
Thanks, Chris. Likewise.
You know, it's very interesting. I didn't learn it from the 30 years I've been doing this, or from law school, or from the practice of law, or journalism, but I learned from The Odd Couple, this whole TV show, from a character named Felix Unger, that when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. That's what the word is, ASSUME. Ass, you, me. Why? Because if you don't know, you don't know. Okay. But that's not where we are in this case. Maybe within the legal process, yes, we're very early on, but we already know that there was probable cause to arrest. We do know that prosecutors say they absolutely are going to indict, and on many, many levels. Now, on what basis? We have to see. Probable cause needs proof. Everything is an allegation, which is a maybe, until they make it a certainty, or to some degree of that within the process as it goes along. That's all true. But just because it hasn't been proven doesn't mean it's not true either, right? And unless the investigators are lying in a way that I have never seen before, and I've seen investigators lie, okay? Well, we talked in another episode about the Duke Lacrosse case. The prosecutor lied there. Now, he may say, no, I didn't. I got taken advantage of by a bad witness. Maybe, maybe not. I don't think so, but that's my opinion. But I've never seen anything like this, where they're so wrong about the condition of the house, so wrong about the condition of the kids, so wrong about the disparity between the parents' condition and the kids' condition, so wrong about the extreme of that, so wrong about whether or not the kids can communicate and can be helpful in their own defense, and not their own defense, but in their own case and their own kind of telling of their reality and their capability to do that, and why they had to be in the hospital. So wrong that they have completely demonized parents without cause. This would be the first time I had ever seen that. Is it possible? Yes. Is it probable? No. Does that mean that counsel for Elizabeth Siders is a liar? No. He's doing his job, which is, I only know what they can show. And if they haven't shown me, then I don't know. And I'm not going to assume against my client, and she tells me it's not the way they say. That's all legit at this point. But we're not at the end. We're at the beginning. And I will follow it all the way through. And I will do it with an instrument of fairness, because the truth is always enough. And you only know the truth by working for it and allowing the process to work and then testing the process. And that's what we will do here. And I look forward to doing it with you, because let me tell you, by all accounts, what we saw in Ohio was a house of horrors. And if that was done to kids, you've got to make it stop. Thank you very much for subscribing and following. Thanks for checking me out on Sirius Radio and NewsNation at night. I appreciate you being with me. Spread the word about CUOMO Crime Time. Let's get after it.